used to be a realtor in Massachusetts. I have two stories from my time showing houses that made me choose a different line of work. You may not think that selling houses is a risky job, but these stories might change your mind. About a year into becoming a realtor, I was getting pretty comfortable setting up meetings with prospective buyers at houses they were interested in seeing. The way it worked was prospective buyers would contact me looking to buy a new house. After some back and forth to narrow down their search, and after they submitted pre-approval paperwork, we started the house showing process. Either I or they would suggest a house to tour. I would get the access code or key to the house, and we would meet there at an appointed time. In the winters, sometimes appointments were scheduled after the sun had gone down, but ideally I would try to schedule with enough time to show the house when it was still light out. It was best for sales to see houses in full light. They were brighter and happier in the daytime. Buyers could see if there were any flaws, and they could see the property outside too. Snooping around a backyard by flashlight isn't the ideal way of presenting a house to a buyer. But timing didn't always work out, and occasionally I'd have to meet prospective buyers after dark. I had been emailing with a young couple who was buying their first house, and their budget was tight. This meant they were limited to houses that were more on the inexpensive side. This would usually mean older houses or ones that might need some extra work. This was fine by me. A sale was a sale. We made a plan to visit a house that was just on the edge of the historic village part of town at about 4:30 p.m. Since it was November, the sun would already be going down, and I told them I'd be there ahead of time to open up the house and to just enter when they arrived. If you don't know, realtors get a good bit of information about a property before they show it. The pictures I had seen of the listing showed an older house, big barn, big house, pretty typical for an older Massachusetts house. The property had been in the same family for about 30 years, until the current owner moved into assisted living. Before that, it had been a funeral parlor. Oh wow. I tried to keep creepy thoughts out of my head, but all I could imagine was where and how the deceased were kept in the house. Well, I wasn't going to live there, I told myself. I pushed the creepy thoughts out of my head and got in my car. Since it had been empty for a few months, I wanted to be sure it didn't smell musty or, looked clean enough to show. It was 3:30. When I arrived at the house, it looked just as it did in the pictures. It was a big 2-story colonial, painted white with black shutters, and had a barn connected to the house by a covered walkway. Oh yeah, that's probably where business was conducted, I thought to myself. It looked a little more run down now, as the previous owner had taken the listing pictures almost a half year prior. The paint was peeling a little, not too badly, but you could tell nobody lived there. Something that I learned through being a realtor: houses that aren't lived in tend to die quickly. They just look empty and unloved, like this house. I grabbed my bag and paperwork and headed to the front door. The lockbox was hanging on the doorknob, and I used the code to open the box to get the house key. The lock gave way, and I opened the door. Peering inside, I could see the only light in the house was coming from the windows. There were no curtains, so the day's remaining light lit the front area. There was a tall open staircase just to the side of the front door, and a hallway leading towards the back of the house along the main floor. From the front door, there was a room to the right and a room to the left. The floors were old hardwood and showed all the signs of years of wear. I stepped inside and looked for the light switch. The front hallway switch didn't turn anything on, so it was probably meant to be used with a lamp, but of course there was no furniture in the house, so I went towards the room to the right. This would have been the living room. I found another light switch there. The overhead light came on, but didn't go too far because of all the dark hardwood. Realtors with a lot of experience will always remind you to be sure and listen when you enter a house. Houses that are empty can sometimes pick up unwanted guests. People who need to get in from the cold and have nowhere else to go. Remembering their warnings, I set my stuff down and listened. It was silent. The only thing I could hear was the wood floor beneath my feet. I kept my coat on because the house was very cold, so cold I could actually see my breath. I started my check of the house by walking towards the back of the room which led to the kitchen. It was dark with only a small window over the old sink. Not much to see here. I left the kitchen and went back towards the hallway under the stairs. As I entered the hallway, I heard what sounded like footsteps on the stairs. I froze. "Hello?" I called out. I figured it was the couple that I was meeting. I walked quickly towards the front of the stairwell and looked up. There was nobody there, and there were no sounds from above. Now, this was an old house with hardwood floors. I would hear somebody moving around if there was somebody there. But the house was silent again. Okay, now I'm just getting spooked. There's nobody there. I would have heard the front door, I thought to myself. I pushed the memory of those steps out of my head and turned to go towards the room to the left of the stairs. This was another sitting area, about the same size as the first room I had entered, but this one had a large stone fireplace. I tried to imagine how that fireplace would have warmed this room and might have actually felt cozy at one point. But not today. The only place left to look in the main house was upstairs. I turned around and started climbing the stairs. With each creaky step, I got more and more creeped out. I couldn't help the feeling that I wasn't alone. I looked at my watch. 3:58. I really had to get it together before this couple showed up. I got to the top of the stairs and turned the corner towards the 2 bedrooms at the front of the house. Between me and the bedrooms, there was a small bathroom with a tub, and it was all in desperate need of a remodel. I walked to the front 2 bedrooms and peeked inside. Of course, there was nobody there. The 2 big empty bedrooms faced the street. I tried to imagine that at some point in the history of the house, those bedrooms had had happy memories, maybe of children or a happy couple. I walked to the back bedroom, past the bathroom, and found the bedroom where the older lady must have spent her last few months. There was a large bed frame and old curtains on the window. This room made me feel uncomfortable, and I turned to leave. Just as I did, I heard the bathroom door shut quietly. The bathroom had 2 doors, one leading to the hallway and the other leading into this bedroom. I turned around. It was the bathroom door to the bedroom that had closed. I stood still for a moment. There are 3 emergency responses a body has to fear: fight, flight, or freeze. And I froze. I don't think it's possible to listen any harder than I did at that moment. I remembered the footsteps that I heard on the stairs and immediately started to panic. After a few moments of hearing nothing, I stepped into the hallway, turned left, and headed towards the open bathroom door. I peered around the corner, craning to look into the bathroom. Since the light was off, I reached my hand into the bathroom and slid it along the wall and found the light switch. The bathroom was empty. There was nobody there, but the door leading to the bedroom was closed. I hadn't imagined the sound. I turned and headed back to the stairs. I told myself, weird things happen in old houses. They shift. They're drafty. I didn't want to give it much thought. As I turned the corner at the top of the stairs, I looked down and froze. At the bottom of the stairs was a tall man wearing a long coat and what looked like a top hat. He looked up the stairs, looked straight at me, and then turned. He walked towards the back of the house behind the stairs. I took 2 steps down the stairs, watching him go, and then he disappeared. I don't mean he went out of sight. I mean he literally disappeared as I was watching him walk away. I realized there had been no footsteps, just movement, just the shape of that man, but no footsteps. It was only my footsteps on the stairs I could hear now. I could hardly process what I had seen. Who was that? What was that? I stood on those stairs for what had to have been a solid minute, leaning back against the wall to keep myself from falling. I had never seen anything like that before. I made it down the stairs and quickly stepped out through the front door. Cold November air hit my face, and it was then that I realized I was shaking, not from the cold, but from what I had just seen. I stood in front of that house for probably 5 minutes, just trying to figure out what to do next. I did not want to go back into that house, but I knew the buyers would be here soon, and it was getting dark. I decided to get my big flashlight out of the car and took a deep breath. I headed back into the house. The last part of the house I had to check was the last one I wanted to go to. It was where that man had gone. I turned on the hallway lights and walked to the back of the house. I turned on the back porch light and the light in the hallway leading to the barn. I doubled up on the light with my big flashlight and took the last few steps to the barn door. I pulled the big wooden door open and shined my flashlight into the barn. I tried reaching around the edge of the wall to find a light switch, but I couldn't find one. I scanned the barn with my big flashlight and saw a big table on one end with the sink over the wide drain. There was a large metal table in the middle of the room. This must have been where the funeral home operated. It was every bit as creepy as you can imagine. With that, I turned around and closed the barn door. I took some quick steps back through the hallway and quickly entered the main house just under the stairwell, and as I rounded the stairwell into the hallway, I ran straight into something solid. I let out a little scream, and so did the wall I ran into. It wasn't a wall, it was the husband of the couple arriving for their appointment. I tried to keep myself together, but I'm sure I looked like a frazzled mess. We laughed for a second, and I welcomed them to the house. I told them I was just looking around before they had arrived. They said they saw my car and figured we were already inside. To take advantage of the remaining daylight, they had taken a peek in the backyard before coming in. We? I asked. Yeah, tall guy in a long jacket. We saw him going into the barn, but he didn't hear us calling to him. Isn't he with you? That was it. I couldn't let these people buy this house without telling them what I'd seen. I brought them outside and we sat in my car. I told them everything. The steps, the bathroom door, that I'd seen the same man. I told them everything. Their response? That's awesome. We're going to live in a real haunted house. I honestly have no idea if they believe me, but they did say they saw the guy. So my conscience is clear. Their financing went through and they moved in. They still live there to this day. Sometimes I wonder if they still see the man in the top hat, and if they see more spirits than the one that looked at me that day. If you enjoyed that story, I'm glad you found me. I tell creepy stories about scary encounters and paranormal events. If this is your thing too, stay, listen, and subscribe to Lady Grimm for more stories. It's okay to keep the lights on. Let me tell you another story. My second story from being a realtor is just as terrifying, but not in a paranormal way. This next story is the reason I stopped selling houses. I was contacted by a prospective buyer who told me he was looking for a house that was in a more rural area because he wanted to be away from the busy city where he worked. He said he had dogs and wanted them to have plenty of space to run. All of this was done via email, and I hadn't spoken to him in person or on the phone. He gave me his financials, and he was pre-approved. I searched for some properties for him and found a couple that were out of town and had some acreage and were in his price range. I emailed him the information for the listings, and he chose the one farthest from my office and farthest from town to see first. Now, I'm not a nervous person, but this guy just made me feel a little off. It was a Tuesday, and we made an appointment to meet that Friday afternoon at the house. In his email, he said, "If we schedule it for Friday afternoon, you can leave early from work and start your weekend early." Coming from anybody else, this might have seemed funny, but it kind of gave me the creeps. I got another email on Wednesday confirming the time, and he also asked me if I was coming alone, because his dogs didn't do well with lots of strangers, and he was planning on bringing them. Well, this was a first. I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with his dogs in somebody else's house. So I checked with the sellers, and they didn't mind. They just wanted the house sold. I let him know the dogs were fine, and it would just be me, so they wouldn't be upset. Yeah, not my brightest moment. On Thursday, he sent me another email confirming the time again. Was this guy just super detailed, or what? I confirmed the time with him again. On Friday afternoon, I left the office, letting my coworker Amanda know which house I was showing, just in case. I showed her the emails, and she told me to be careful. Amanda is one of those people that's always worried about everything, so normally I would say, I know, but this time I felt a little worried myself. Massachusetts in the summer is beautiful. The days are warm, the evenings are cool, and everything is buzzing with life. I had the windows rolled down and tried thinking about my weekend plans, but instead, thoughts of how this guy gave me the creeps wouldn't get out of my head. The house was about 40 minutes from the office, and I arrived a few minutes before the scheduled time. I parked and walked to the front door. I opened the lockbox for the key and unlocked the front door. I did my usual tour through the house to be sure everything looked okay. I started on the main floor, then checked the upstairs bedrooms. Everything looked good. I went down the stairs and into the kitchen. I was setting my bag down on the counter when I heard a click. Anything from hardwood floors creaking to alarms that beep, and sometimes even bugs that get trapped in the house bumping the windows to get out. I stopped and listened, but I couldn't hear anything from the kitchen. I stepped into the living room and saw that the basement door was open. Had it been open before? I couldn't remember. I should check the basement, I thought. I walked to the basement door and started down the stairs. It was dark, so I clicked on the lights and tried to take in everything I was seeing. There was a blue tarp on the ground and a duffel bag next to it. There were 2 large knives placed together on the tarp. As my eyes were taking it all in, I heard another click. The door at the top of the stairs had closed, and I turned around to look at the now dark staircase. I found myself staring at a very large man in a dark hoodie. He rushed towards me, and I turned to run. There was an open door at the far end of the basement. I ran across the tarp and made it through the door. It was the basement bathroom. I slammed the door shut, barely getting the door closed as he reached for me. He pounded the door once, then silence. I listened hard, but only heard my heart pounding in my ears. I leaned against the door, inches away from this monster. I could hear him breathing through the edge of the door. Then I heard him laugh. "Well, this just got interesting," he said. I was shaking. My heart was racing. I looked around, but there was nothing in the bathroom. Of course, it was just empty. I heard him walk away. then come back. "I will get you," he whispered into the edge of the door. He walked away again, laughing. I fumbled around my pockets to see if I had anything, a pen, a key, anything I could use to protect myself. When I felt the familiar feel of my phone, I started crying. I was so relieved. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. "What's your emergency?" the voice said. It felt so good to hear someone's voice. I told the operator as quietly as I could that somebody had me trapped in a bathroom and I'm afraid for my life. I told her the address and she told me to stay on the line. I waited for the police for what felt like an eternity. I just stood there with my full weight against the door, hoping it wouldn't break. Finally, the 911 operator said the cops were arriving, and I heard footsteps on the stairs, and then footsteps upstairs. Was that him? A few minutes later, I heard more footsteps on the stairs, and the police announced themselves. I opened the door and was so relieved to see the uniformed officers. One took my statement as I tried to calm down. The guy had taken off before they could get him. I called Amanda at the office, and she tried tracking down his paperwork that he'd submitted for pre-qualification, but it was all stolen information. He was a ghost. In the duffel bag, they found rope, a camera, an empty SIM card, and duct tape. This guy was going to hurt me and film it or take pictures. I'm very lucky to be alive to tell you this story. I stopped selling houses after this experience. It was too close a call, especially since that man was never caught.